Okay, hello. Oh wow, that's loud. Hello everyone, welcome to our talk today. My name's Rebecca Omanira Oyekami. I'm an independent journalist from the UK. I report on social injustice, and between 2011 and 2016, I did a lot of reporting on the travels of migrants through the European Union. But today, I've got the honor of chairing this really exciting panel, showcasing the work of the European Journalism Centre's grantees. These projects are supported by the European Journalism Centre for their reporting on gender equality. Each one tackles the subject in an innovative way, using images, multimedia, data, and words to tell stories that seem familiar, but are very often told in a simplistic and reductive way. These projects dismantle the idea of women and girls as victims, and instead they celebrate and investigate areas where they are active agents. We've got 5 projects to hear from today, so there's a lot to get through. So we'll start by hearing from 3 projects, which will take roughly 15 minutes. And so please think of questions when those projects are happening, because you'll get a chance to ask people questions after that. Then we'll have 2 more projects and 10 minutes for questions after that. So we'll end with a final word from our speakers once we've all had a chance to hear the presentations and ask questions about the future of reporting on gender, poverty and development issues, and how we can all build on and learn from the work that we've heard about today. So the first project we'll hear from is Crossing the River, about 3 midwives from Sierra Leone, Uganda, and Nigeria, and it's going to be presented by Emanuela Zuccalà.
Okay. Good morning to everyone. And thanks, Rebecca, for the introduction. Yes, my project is about one of the main issues concerning women's health, which is maternal mortality. It's one of the main issues because maternal mortality is still very, very high in certain parts of the world. Just to give you some data, in the so-called developed world, out of 100,000 live births, 12 women die. In sub-Saharan Africa, this rate is over 500, so it's dramatically high. And so I decided to face this issue in sub-Saharan Africa, choosing three countries which are significant from different points of views, because Sierra Leone is the country with the highest maternal mortality rate in the world, which is over 1,000 maternal deaths out of 100,000 live births. Uganda is an interesting country because Ugandan government made a lot of progress in fighting and overcoming maternal mortality, but there are still some regions like Karamoja, where I'm going next week, which are still neglected, and they have this problem in a very high proportion. And finally, I will go to Nigeria in the Borno State. The Borno State is the house of Boko Haram, and so it's a state which has been living a great humanitarian crisis, and so women's condition is weak, and maternal mortality is very high. How trying to avoid the stereotypes about women, and especially about African women, because I've been working on women's issues for many years, and it's absolutely evident that African women are often portrayed as victims, as poor women, illiterate women, and all the stereotypes that we can imagine and then we know. In this project, I focused on 3. There are not midwives, actually. One is a midwife in Nigeria, another one is a nurse, and the third third one is an expert in public health. 3 African women who have been making the difference in fighting maternal mortality. So 3 women who are very engaged, very committed, very strong, and so they are really changing things in better. 3 wonderful characters. Just a word about the project. The project is funded by the European Journalist Center through the Journalist Grant, and it's in collaboration with 2 Italian NGOs, which are Doctors with Africa, QAM, and Intersos. And I'm producing it with a photographer whose name is Valeria Cardi. I wanted to show some photos if we have time, but I'm not able to do that. Okay. So these are the pictures. Some of the pictures of Valeria Cardi, who is a very talented and young photographer. We are still in a production period. We will have the web documentary in September. We just did one trip in Sierra Leone, and I would like. This is Flavor. Flavor now is our main character in Sierra Leone. She's an expert in public health, and she's doing wonderful things. Just an example, she's working with this NGO whose name is Doctors with Africa, and she organized a referral system for the women in a rural area which is Bonte district in the very south of Sierra Leone, where there are no roads. Everybody's moving on the rivers, on the boats. So it's very difficult for women in emergency and with the health complications during pregnancy to reach the hospital. The hospital is on an island. But she organized both ambulances and most of all, she organized a very strong training of the community health workers so that they can recognize the complications in time and refer the women to the hospital. I would like to show you a video. We have time. 2 minutes. Yeah, the video is 2 minutes. And this is an emergency situation. Flavor was called one morning, very early, and we went with them to rescue a woman which had a complication during pregnancy.
We are arriving that place. That is the place we are going to. But the PHU is a bit far. We can go out.
Huh?
We go?
Yeah, let's wait. Let's wait. I'll get with you. Yeah, Mom.
See why I like to put on slippers. Because you can remove it at any time.
Our strategy is focusing on the community, focusing on the primary health, as well as the secondary health services. So CHW is basically someone that is chosen by the community to represent them, to be a sort of a health link in the community.
Where is the key of the bike? Albert, but why is it taking so long? Albert!
For me, the most difficult part is when we try our best for a woman and then we lose that woman. For me, it's really bad because the main reason why I'm here is to try to stop this. And if it happens, it really affects me. I really get affected, like what have we done wrong? What can we do to make it better? And losing one woman means a loss not only to the children, but to a whole lot of other people as well. A woman is always considered to be under a man. They are supposed to submit and they cannot make a decision on their own. In cases where somebody comes to hospital and they need an operation, sometimes they will tell you that my husband is not here, I cannot make a decision.
You can carry all this money here, you can't carry this small woman.
Yeah.
So this is one of the emergency situations, and I mean it's not so easy to build this referral system. Just the last word: maternal mortality is strictly related to gender inequality. That's why I chose this topic, because in the countries where the gender equality index is lower, the maternal mortality is higher. For a simple reason, because women's health in these countries is considered not worth to be focused. And so we also will have a part of data journalism showing this very interesting and bad link between maternal mortality and gender inequality. Thank you.
So the second project we're going to hear from today is an in-depth investigative project looking at how contraceptives are accessed in different countries. It's going to be presented by Eva Belmont. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you. 1 second. Here. So thank you, Rebecca, and good morning, everyone. My name is Eva Belmonte. I'm managing editor at Cibio. Cibio is a non-profit newsroom based in Spain. We do mainly data and investigative journalism. And most of the time we are focused on national politics, on corruption and similar issues. And once a year, because we need to stop talking about corruption, we do these international projects. And all of them are based or focused on access to health. And the project is called Medicamentalia. This is my team. As you can see, it's a small team, and as you can see, we have a gender issue ourselves. But the good thing is, in Medicamentalia, we work mainly women. We collaborate only with women, and almost 100% of the team are women. So we did this project called Medicamentalia. First, we investigate prices to medicines, access to medicines. Then when we investigate prices governments are paying for the different vaccines around the world. And this third edition of Medicamentalia is focused on contraception. It's the first time we work on a mainly woman issue, so we have a lot to learn here. And we combine data journalism with reporting in Gambia, Senegal, Israel, and Mexico. And most of the data we use is based on surveys, and only in surveys answered by women. A lot of men ask us why we only take into account the answers by women. But the thing is, in most of the countries we were, women are, only them are responsible, are accountable for getting pregnant. So I don't care very much about men answers the questions. And also we realized a lot of men were talking about that, but most of the time. And we wanted to change that a little bit. So about the data, for example, we show data about the methods they use in each country. And for example, it's very, well, I wanted to say funny, but it's not really funny, that female sterilization is the main method they use in a lot of countries. And of course, male sterilization is almost something very, very, very small. And we also work with the main problem we found here, this unmet needs. Unmet needs is when a woman don't want to have more children, or don't want to have any children, or want to space their childbirth, and they cannot access to contraception. So we wanted to know why this problem was happening. And of course, we realize if the country has lower incomes, this problem is worse. But there are some countries when we found that this situation was very, very bad, and it was not a money problem, really. And we wanted to know why these women have not access to contraception until they wanted to use them. And the main reason, and that was very shock for me because I didn't expect that solution to the question, that answer. The main reason to not use contraceptives until you need them is because the side effects. And we discover pharma companies and we discover governments and scientific investigations are not prioritizing, like improving this thing, because it's a woman health problem. So they are not investing in like having less side effects until they know it's the main problem for not using contraception. And meanwhile, they were investing, trying to find this men pill, and they discover a lot of side effects, and they decide it's not enough important to continue investigating because side effects are hard for them. So, but we also focus on other problems, and these ones were like the most important for me, were the opposition. Sometimes the opposition is from the own woman saying I don't want to use them, sometimes for cultural reasons, but other times is the husband deciding, is the mother-in-law deciding, or the priest is deciding. So we wrote this other article about religion. We wanted to know how religion is affecting the use of contraception right now, in this moment, because it seems sometimes and all a really old thing. And we discover, as we analyze Catholics' use and Islam, and we discover the main problem is not the religion is absolutely close to the use of contraception. The main problem is only men read and translate the scriptures. Only men translate the God's words and explain what it means. So that's the main problem. And a lot of women, religious women we talk to, explain to us that the main solution will be more women reading and studying religion and translating these words that are so open to interpretation. And a main problem we find is when we were the first 2 days in Gambia, for example, I realized I was only talking to men, talking about that. That was absolutely crazy, because most of the times, as Emanuela said, women are treated as victims of the problem, but they never appear as experts of the problem. So we did an extra effort to try to talk to women, and we discovered there are a lot of women who are really, really, really experts on that, but they are not so easy to find sometimes in some countries. And I want to show you just 1 minute of video. We wanted to talk with them about their experiences, but also them being experts and also them talking about their personal experiences. I'm gonna put you just 1 minute. Mostly here, for example.
Also bei der ersten Fötungsmethode der Pille habe ich mich sowohl von meiner Frauenärztin, da war ich noch sehr jung, 16, und sowohl als auch von meiner Familie so ein bisschen unter Druck gesetzt gefühlt.
When your husband said that you take the method, you will take. When he say no, no.
Yeah, doctor give me the medicine. He said this medicine is good. I take the medicine.
She got 7 children, and the spacing was not good.
biir naa feebar na ñëw ma bañ koo amalati doom ñu ne xëj na dafa wàññeeku moo tax léegi mu sànni ko amul doom bu gutta am doom.
Well, that's mainly the. Where is my presentation? Here, not here. Well, you know what happens when it's not your computer and you have no idea everything. Here, perfect. I'm here again, perfect. So we publish everything, the video, the data, the articles, in our webpage, it's medicamentalia.org. And we publish it in Spanish and English, and we have agreements with some media in other countries to publish in other languages and other countries. So if you want to publish it, please talk to me. And I wanted to finish with a small, beautiful story, not related to Medicamentalia, but I think it's important. Last March, the 8th, at the Global Women Movement, more than 8,000 women journalists in Spain signed a manifesto asking for more equality in the media and for a better image of women at the media, not as victims, not as the wife of someone. And we marched together for the first time, women from different media. And I think this kind of organizations and this kind of collaboration between women is key to improve how women appear at the media. And that's all. Thank you.
So our final presentation in this half of the talk is called When Women Rule. So after this presentation, you can ask some questions of the first three that you've heard. So have a think about questions you'd like to ask. So this project looks at challenges women politicians face across the global south, and it's presented by Valeria Cardi. Thank you, Valeria.
Good morning, everyone. One sec. So, hi, my name is Valeria Cardi. I work as a producer at the Thomson Reuters Foundation. The foundation is part of Thomson Reuters, is the charitable arm, and very much like Thomson Reuters, we produce news, but we only focus on certain areas: climate change, trafficking and slavery, property rights, social innovation, food and food insecurity, and women's rights. And so we decided to focus on gender equality in politics, and the underlying question behind the project was to look at whether having more women in politics is just an aim in itself. It looks good to have women in politics, or whether actually that brings difference and makes a difference to society. I might play a teaser to the project first, and then I'm going to talk about the project a bit more. So we made a multimedia project, and because I'm part of a team of journalists from the foundation, and we traveled to 6 countries. And so we went to Bolivia. We thought Bolivia was an interesting country to focus on because it comes second after Rwanda for the number of women at parliamentarian level. But when you then look at the number of mayors in the country, only 10% are women. So we featured the first female mayor of Elato, which is the second largest city in Bolivia. Then in Nigeria, we focused on Nena Lendu-Keje. She's been an MP for 10 years, and so we were interested in hearing her experience in a country where the number of MPs is decreasing. In Kenya, we focused on the first Maasai MP when she first ran for election in 2013, and Paris Tobiko, and her story is just incredible. Her dad tried to marry her off 3 times, but she managed not to when she went to university. And when she first decided to run for office, the Maasai, very conservative Maasai community she grew up in cursed her to death. They told her, "You're not gonna see tomorrow. You're gonna die." But she still managed. She still continued her campaign, and she was elected in 2013, and she was re-elected last year as well. And now there are 2 more Maasai MPs in Kenya as well. In Jordan, we focused on Wafa Bani Mustafa. We were interested in looking at a country in the Middle East, and Bani Mustafa was very instrumental in passing a number of laws affecting women and girls in the country. Up until last year in Jordan, rapists wouldn't be prosecuted if they married their victims, and in August last year a law was passed that now they stopped that, and Bani Mustafa was very instrumental in making that happen. In India, we focused on a village head. We were interested in looking at lower levels, political levels as well. Globally, there aren't that many figures available for the number of women active at the political level, at local levels, but we were interested in looking at what happens when you have women as a village head. So we focused on Chavi Rajawat. She was the youngest village head in India to be elected when she was first elected in 2010, and she faced threats and attacks, and also a lot of resistance from her male colleagues throughout her work as a village head. And then finally we traveled to Kyrgyzstan, and Kyrgyzstan was interesting for a number of reasons. The rates, child marriage, kidnapping, domestic violence are rife in the country. And up until in 2005, Kyrgyzstan had no women MPs. And the women MPs only started to arrive and get into office after a quota law was introduced in the country. And so we were interested in looking at how that was affecting the country and society more generally in in Kyrgyzstan. Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll show you the multimedia page. The idea behind, so basically, we wanted to look at the challenges that women face and whether they make any difference. In terms of the challenges, what we found was that violence was very discouraging. So Paris Tobiko in Kenya, Nena Lendukeja, there were shootings happening while she was running for office, in one of her political rallies, and also lack of funding and being cut out of the networks, male-dominated networks. So these were the three main challenges that we came across while interviewing and featuring these women. And in terms of the impact, in Kyrgyzstan, for example, a number of laws were passed because they were pushed by the women MPs that are all grouped across party in a women caucus. And so last year, religious child marriage was abolished and banned. Brat kidnapping was also banned in 2013, but because there weren't any political actions taken beyond the passing of the law, it didn't really bring any results. Whereas with the child marriage ban, they kind of tried to engage with the community, and they were very active in engaging in the community as well, and that has brought a lot of results. The multimedia project comes with a longer feature and then individual articles for each individual politician that we featured. There's a long documentary at the top, and then photographs from the various trips that we made. That's it. Thank you very much.
So I want to start by opening the questions by asking all three of you. A lot of the projects that you're doing, they involved a lot of field reporting on the ground, and obviously they're countries, you're coming from Europe and you're going to countries in the global south. So how, and you all, Emanuela especially, you talked about trying to avoid presenting these African women as stereotypes. So what method do you use to avoid that? Because there is like this traditional idea of Western journalists going to these places and telling the stories of these people, but from the images that you've presented and the stories that you've told, you've obviously managed to avoid doing that. So yeah, can you explain how you did that?
For me, the key, and that's not only with women issues, it's in general, I always work with local journalists, because you have no idea what the country is about when you arrive. You cannot be like the European who arrive there like, oh, I know more than you about your country. So what I do, I love doing reporting in the field by my own, because I love traveling alone and it's great, but you need a local journalist working with you. So what we do normally is collaborate with local journalists and we work together. And in this case, with women local journalists, so they know. And at the beginning, when you talk with official institutions, they send you to the men, the experts. And if you can talk to the woman really having problems or this woman local journalists, and you ask them, they know a lot of women, a lot of experts knowing about that. You need to not only use like the official institutions like the United Nations or the NGOs, like try to ask directly the people working there, because they know who help them normally.
Asking a lot of questions and surely but also for our project we were featuring and interviewing people who are already in a position of power somehow. So it wasn't that difficult in that respect to just give them the space to express themselves and tell us what the issues they thought were important for them and the countries they represented. It's still a struggle sometimes when you then go back and have to report and you have a limited number of words and a limited number of minutes, so sometimes it's very hard still to give a fully nuanced story. But yes, you have to do your best, I suppose.
In the case of this particular project about maternal mortality, I asked to myself how can I face this topic, which is not a fancy topic. I mean, in my opinion, I found it very difficult to talk about this topic, because usually one say, yeah, maternal mortality is so boring, no? But okay, if you think about it with more attention, I mean, it's terrible that women die when they are pregnant, so it's something that is unbearable in my opinion. So I decided this kind of format, choosing 3 women, 1 per country. Per country, I say, but we tell a specific area of the country. And so this woman, Flavia, for instance, she is the main character, and she's introducing everything to the reader, to the audience. So she's the protagonist, and she's speaking with the women. She's literally making the women speak, interviewing the women. So it's not me, it's her, and I'm going to do the same thing in Uganda and in Nigeria. Of course, I tell Flavia what what it's interesting to me to know, but is the woman who's making the story, let's say, and I think it can be a good way to avoid stereotypes.
Thank you. So I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions. If you could try to ask a specific question rather than make a comment, that would be great. There's a mic. Can you raise your hand if you have a question? No? Okay, there's a question at the back.
My question is, thank you ladies, it was really interesting to hear you speak. My question is, how important is it for you to make sure that the people who are featured in your stories also get to see how they're represented? So usually the audiences are back in your media markets, so how do you get them to then, how important is it to build that into your sort of storytelling plan, the kind of consumption of that story back in those communities?
Good question.
How to be sure that they see the story? Usually personally, I always try to make the people that I reported about see what I did. Of course, it's not always possible, especially with people in very remote rural areas. They don't have the internet, but usually when I link with an NGO, and thanks to that NGO, I interview people, I always show what I did. So I always try to be sure that they know the way they are represented. Personally, my style is very, how can I say, is very, I try not to be dramatic. I try not to be, to build up something that is not inside the story. I like, very clean style, and so I try not to give a more dramatic situation and try to portray the people in a, let's say, objective way as far as I can. So.
Well, sometimes it's personal, it's kind of, you interview them and then months later when you finish, you send them. Sometimes we do special pieces for some of the women we interview because they want to show their daughters or something, so we did special materials. But for us, the most important thing is we try to publish also in the countries we are reporting. Because as we collaborate with local journalists, so the local journalists can later try to sell or publish the reports we do. So we don't publish only in Europe, we publish here, but then the local journalist can sell the whole report there. And a third way is because all our materials are Creative Commons and they can use them. Sometimes if you are talking with people in an NGO, for example, an expert, as we did in Gambia, for example, they later can use this material for their campaigns or everything.
Very much the same, and it's always a bit nerve-wracking when you send a link to the person that you spend so much time with, and you obviously want to retain your independence, but you don't want to disappoint them as well. So it's always, when you're waiting for their reply, it's always a bit like that.
We got a question over here.
Hello. I was questioning how safe is it for the ladies to talk about this. Like, because the men have a lot of influence on them, is it like they have pressure from them that they don't may speak about some things, or are they free to tell everything they like? Like, yeah, how does it work?
Yeah. No, that was the most difficult part. In Gambia, but the main problem was Israel, really, with Orthodox Jewish women. And, you know, if we ask, I don't know, 100 women to be in the video talking about their own experience, like 3 in Israel say yes. And most of them told us, I cannot do that without the permission of my husband. And that was the same in all the countries we went. So, yeah, it's a main problem. And it's a main problem, not only they cannot talk because they don't have the permission, it's a main problem they don't want to talk because a lot of women think they are not enough important to talk in a video about an issue that is affecting them directly. So sometimes you need to fight against their own cultural vision of them and themselves, and sometimes you need to fight with the husband being the one deciding that. Yeah.
Could I ask a question about the contraceptive projects? So you used a lot of data, and I know, like, for example, I do a lot of reporting on how policy affects women in the UK, and one of the things I struggle to find is data which looks at data that looks at race and at gender together. So you can get data on gender, data on race, but never together. So I just wondered how you tackled that across such a spread of countries.
Well, normally in all our projects, the data is a mess. It's not always the data we want to use, really, and we will. So normally what we do is try to combine different sources and try to get some conclusions, being extremely rigorous, and this is very difficult. And the problem we had, for example, we had data, we have an application at the end of the article of data, and you can look at one country and now, for example, which is the main method they use, the main needs they have are the main reasons, and you can look at this data for economical levels, for study levels, for education, and also if they live in the rural or the urban area. But you don't have race, for example, data to discriminate, because in some countries it's very important, maybe not in Gambia, but in Israel it's very important, and in Europe it's very important, because sometimes in countries, as in Spain is happening, for example, it's not so important, like the levels is more important where they are living exactly, but in the north or in the south, this kind of difference. So the data is not as specific as we would love to. So we try to combine data being rigorous, but sometimes that's not possible.
Does anyone in the audience have a question? I wanted to ask a question, Emanuela, about the your project. It's like he was saying, it's not a sexy topic that people normally pick, but it's very important, and it's a very difficult topic. How did you decide that was the topic you were going to focus on? And in the situations where you've got a woman that might die and you're having to report, like, how do you make the decision of to keep recording? Is there ever a point where you just sort of stop recording? And yeah, I don't know.
I hope not finding myself in a situation where a woman is about to die. I mean, I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for pregnant women in emergency, like the situation we showed that we went there.
Emergency,
yeah, emergency, but I mean, no, I think that if a woman is dying and I'm not filming, I think so. I want to be able to do that. It's not that kind of journalism I'm looking for. I always try to, so I chose this topic because I've been writing and filming and working on women's issue for 15 years, let's say, maybe 20 years. And that was the only topic that I never faced in depth. So I decided, for the reason that I tried to explain before, because maternal mortality is strictly linked to gender inequality and to poverty. And so it's maternal mortality is a sort of mirror of the injustices that are going on in many developing countries. And so I decided to do that. But yes, I always try to do a sort of, let's say, solution journalism. So I'm not filming and interviewing the woman who's dying, but I'm interviewing the women who are making something to find a solution. So that's my point. But in every work I do with women, for instance, I did a big project about female genital mutilations, and the focus was about African women who's been fighting for a long time to eradicate female genital mutilations. So that's my way.
Thank you. So now we're going to hear about a girls' game, which is about women playing football in Gambia, Brazil, and Denmark, presented by Mariangela Maturi.
Okay, so let's talk about football. First of all, let me thank Michele for inviting us to introduce our project, and let me thank Irene Caselli, that is my colleague who works with me on this project, and the third of us. We are an all-women team. The third of us is living in Thailand, so she cannot be here today. And, well, as we like to say, we use football actually as a lens to speak about women and their stories, and to try to explain let's say, many of the underlying issues behind gender inequality. So it's quite a weird lens we decided to use. The aim of our project was to answer a simple question. So can football be also a women's game? Of course, this question implied much more than what it say, actually. So, according to FIFA, for instance, 30 million girls and women play football every day in the world, so quite a huge number. Nevertheless, they are facing discrimination on many levels and different situations according to their country, of course. So, in the most privileged situation, they are facing stereotypes, of course. For instance, let's remember the paradigmatic example of the former Italian president of the Amateur Football Association, who a few years ago he said, let's stop talking about money we have to give to that bunch of lesbians. So that was the level. At the same time, in countries like Denmark that are most advanced in the gender equality ranking, in the European gender equality ranking, there is still a lack of resources, and the football players of the national team are striking to try to close the gender pay gap. So that is the situation in a country like Denmark. We decided then to go to Florida to interview one of the best football players in the world, so that is Marta. She's a Brazilian player, and even now that she became a legend, she's still known in her home country like the Pelé in the skirt. So there is always a comparison with male. We then went to Brazil, that is the country of football, to find out that is actually the country of male football, of course. Then we decided to go to the Gambia, where the situation, of course, is different, where poverty hits the population, but there are other issues, like, for instance, the female genital mutilations or child marriage that are widespread phenomena. So we understand that the cultural barrier there is affecting the girls who are just passionate about football as well. And there we cover the most touching story we have. That is the story of Fatim Jawara. She was a rising star of the Gambian national team. She was the goalkeeper of the team that made it to the 2012 World Cup of the girls of the under 17. And in 2016, she decided to leave the country without saying anything to her family, and she took the back way, that is the way that migrants from the Gambia used to get to Europe, because her dream was to play in Europe. And of course, in Gambia, it's quite hard to find talent scouts or resources to do that. So she left, and sadly she died trying to cross in the Mediterranean. So she was on a boat that capsized with her and dozens of migrants on board. So we decided to go to the Gambia, meet her family, and try to understand the story to explain that. So if you want, I can show you the trailer. Okay. Where is he? Okay. This is our website. Whoop. Here we are. Oh, thanks. I'm old style. Here we are.
Quem busca a bola, quem tá no gol?
I started playing when we came to Denmark in 2000. Started in a refugee camp. Suddenly there was no war and you have a safe place to sleep and it could be a kid. So I'm lucky that I got out and I got a second chance.
She always said that I want to play for a team at Europe.
So my Fatim said, oh, Fatim went to Dakar. She went for a game.
I heard it from our assistant captain. She told me that Fatim went to Bagwe. I told her, no, that's impossible.
Não aceitavam com tanta naturalidade. Até mesmo pelo fato das pessoas continuarem achando que era algo proibido para meninas. Você recebeu olhares estranhos e comentários maldosos todos os dias. Simplesmente porque você era uma garota. Uma garota que amava futebol.
Says dream big.
So this is it, and you can find many other contents on our website, that is girlsgame.net. There we have our complete web doc with videos embedded, and we are updating the list of media outlets that are publishing us in those months. Thank you.
Our final project today is Coding Like a Girl, and it's going to be presented by Michele Bertelli.
Good morning, everyone. Whoa. Thanks for being here. Yeah, my name is Michele Bertelli. I'm a journalist and a documentary filmmaker. I developed this project about girls and women in coding in the computing world with 3 colleagues of mine that are one German, Felix Lil, one Spanish, Javier Sawas, and a Somali, Abdi Latif. We decided to deal with this project because if you think about you know, a software developer, the image that comes into your mind is probably the typical nerdy guy with 4 inches glasses. Well, in reality, women have been involved in coding since the very beginning because the first computer developer was a mathematician called Ada Lovelace, who literally theoretically invented the first computer machine in the middle of the 19th century. And if we look at the Second World War and the 60s, women were the largest trained workforce in the computing industry. But then came the 80s, and according to many scholars, the way that home computing was marketed, basically as a gaming system for young men, they moved away women from coding. So from that point towards, their paths started diverging. And if you think that this is getting better, well, it's not, because in 1995, there were about 37% of women working in the computing industry. Nowadays, there's been a plunge. I'm talking about the Western world now. There's been a plunge to less than 27%. This means that there are, in percentage, less women in coding today than roughly 20 years ago. Now, we started digging about this topic, and we wondered why, as journalists, care about this, because we're journalists, we're not activists. And well, the World Economic Forum estimated last year that to close the gender pay gap, it's going to take 217 years. And if you look at another World Economic Forum report, you might see that in the next 2 years, there's going to be a 5.1 million job losses in the traditional economic sector. But computing industry will see an increase of 2.9%. So this means that if women are missing their train, it's going to take even more than 217 years to close this gender pay gap. But again, as I was saying, this is a typical Western perspective. Because if you look at other places of the world like India and Malaysia and Nigeria, you might discover that the percentage of women into computing classes is way higher. So we've decided to find out what's going on in the so-called developing world. So we decided to travel to a least developed country, which is Tanzania, to a recently developed and middle-income country, Peru, where there's a digital booming industry, and compare them with a rich country, Germany. We decided to follow the story of 3 different girls who wanted to launch their startups, started a career into computer industry, and check out what are the problems and the challenges that they have to face every day. We tried to make it funny and interesting, so we decided to, okay. We decided to create a sort of, you know, this 80 arcade video game where you have 3 protagonists, and you have to follow them in their, let's call them, day-to-day adventure. Of course, we make it funny, but these are all real-life stories. So we have Angie, Jacinta, and Eva, which are coming, of course, from Peru, Tanzania, and Germany. And I just wanted to show you the first video of Jacinta, so you can understand what computing means for a 17-year girl who is born in a least developed country.
Jacinta, Jacinta, vamos cá. Vem cá, vem cá.
My daily routine for school routes is just when I'm waking up at 5 o'clock. I'm living with my mom, my aunt, and my brother and other young sisters. Sometimes dad is coming to visit us before he passed away. My mom is a businesswoman. She has a shop nearby school. She's selling books for students. She's just waking up very early, going to the job, and when she's coming back, it's late. From home to school, it's too far, and it's like 1.5 hours to go there if there is no jam, a traffic jam. But if there is a traffic jam, it may take even 2 hours.
It's Spanish because this version was published on El Confidencial.
I like mathematics. I really love mathematics. When I heard about ICT, I thought that it's something very hard. At the moment, my friend was ICT girl. When I met her, I was surprised with what she's doing and tried to ask her, how could you do this as a young girl? She's just telling me that I just met with a woman. A woman who's leading an organization called Absent Girls to bring girls in ICTs.
So what we did was basically to follow 3 different initiatives across the world that are trying to crack the gender gap into the computing technology. And what we find out is that we started with an economic point of view, as I was saying, but there's more to this story. Because there's a lot about self-esteem, making these girls believe in themselves and making them believe that they actually can be an active part of their society. As Jacinta was saying, I thought it was too difficult for a girl, basically. And all her companions thought exactly the same. So I just wanted to close about saying 3 different things about the kind of discoveries that we had along the process. What's needed to bring more women into technology, into STEM, into any other field? We need more role models. Because if a girl doesn't see a woman who's working on the field, she will never imagine herself there. We need representation. The second story, the one from Angie in Peru, shows that, well, it's about this initiative who trains girls for in a 6 months boot camp. And after they have been trained, they look for a work placement. And their salaries, when they find a job, they are 3 times higher than their previous one before they join the boot camp. Now, this means that it represents a massive development for their families and the whole social economic status. But they can do this also because the organization that trained them, which is called Laboratoria, goes and negotiates the salary directly with their employer. And the last things that is needed are policies. Because as we've seen, I'm not talking too much about Germany, but we've seen that by putting active policies in places like gender quota in the bigger industries, they also modify the overall culture and allows women to enter more easily into biggest industries and managing positions. So, thank you.
That was great. Both of those projects were funded by foundations, by the European Journalism Centre, is that right? So how does that affect the way you go about telling the stories? What's the relationship like with the funder? How do you measure impact of those particular stories? And that's a question for both of you.
Should I go ahead? Well, measuring impact is highly difficult. What we try to do is to work with local organizations on the ground. It's a different type of job because we are journalists and we dig, we investigate, and then we report. But what we try to do is to make our material available also for them. So if we highlight a particular story or a particular situation, then it can help their work on the ground. Regarding the relationship with the European Journalism Centre, yes, all our works have been funded throughout a public program called Journalism Grants, which promotes reporting in the developing world about human rights topics, basically, and SDG topics. You have to manage everything, basically. You have to present a project, you have to come up with clear ideas about the way you are developing it, and how are you going to manage your budget, your timing there, and then you discuss it with the European Journalism Centre, which helps you in developing a clear strategy.
Yes, I agree with Michele. of course, in our case, for instance, was a bit complicated because we were 3 journalists, we are all freelancers, and we are from different sides of the world. So even a Skype call sometimes is complicated, and organize 4 trips was even more complicated, of course. And you have to deal with the budget you have, so you have to try to find the best solution for everything. And of course, you need the help of the people, the local journalists, that is really pivotal to find a way to tell the stories. And yeah, that is the situation to tackle. But absolutely, without the helping of the journalism center, we wouldn't have made that. So yeah, it was essential for us.
Thank you. I'll open it up to questions from the audience. Okay, we've got a question at the front.
Very simple question.
If you could wait for the microphone. Sorry, it's being recorded.
Very simple question. What's the URL for Coding Like a Girl?
Oh, yeah, sure. I forgot it. Coding Like a Bird, it's been published in Spain on El Confidencial and on Spiegel in Germany. It's going to be published in Italy in the upcoming weeks on the third Italian national TV, Rai 3. And we will publish also in English on Al Jazeera English. If you want to follow updates, just look for us on the social media. We're on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. It's Coding Like a Girl, and you can find the URL there.
Question at the back.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm the director of the EJC. Hi.
How are you doing?
So I wanted to ask the panel, what can we do better? What can the European Journalism Centre do better to help your reporting?
Wow. That's probably the toughest question. Working closer with media organizations, I guess. I mean, bond more with media organizations so we can help, we can create a more fluid workflow. That's my opinion.
And another thing, because we are often talking about the impact of the project, which is of course very important, but personally, but we were talking about it yesterday also, we don't know how to measure the impact, because what's the impact? Is it to publish your project in a mainstream media so that potentially a lot of people are reading it? But it's not a real impact, because impact means also that your project is changing things, but is able journalists to change things? So maybe I personally would like to know more about the impact, and maybe finding together some, I don't know, objective tools that we decide that can measure the impact of our project. That would be very interesting.
And just let me say a last thing. What I really appreciate is that the support was given to freelance journalists as well, because for us it's not always easy to go and cover some stories, because we don't have enough resources to do that by ourselves. So it's pivotal for people like us to have this support.
We need, for us, and also I'm not a freelance, so I'm working as more organization, as a profit user, but we need to collaborate with media to arrive to more people. So at the end, for us, the most difficult part of all investigations is not the proposal, the 4 months of investigation being on the field, but the most difficult part is to adapt the materials to every media, to discuss with them the economical agreement, everything. That's the most difficult part of all the project. You have been reporting in a very difficult issue in the shit of the world, and the most difficult part is talking with that kind of people. So that will be, we need to improve in this relation between traditional media and us, because for them sometimes collaborate with an outsider is kind of a crazy thing they are not used to.
I just want to quickly plug, I went to a talk at the conference a couple of days ago, and there was a group, some great women from the Center for Investigative Reporting in San Francisco, and they've actually developed an impact app, so it's worth having a look at that. I can give you the details after, but it's really interesting. We've got time for a final question.
festival, not so much tech today. So, but the question would be, if it wouldn't have been funded by the European Journalism Center, which is great they do so, what would it need in your countries that legacy media organization would go into the topics that write pieces? So maybe you can get some impression what makes it so difficult to sell that kind of stories, multimedia stories, gender stories in legacy media or other big organization who would simply finance it.
And if we could be very brief with our answers, because we have to wrap up. Sorry.
Okay. Well, if it wouldn't been for the public support of the European Journalism Center, it's basically impossible to develop a project like that, because it takes a lot of money, not only to report there, but also to put it together, and it involves a lot of different professionalities. I mean, I've been working with journalists, filmmakers, photographers, data journalists, developers, social media managers, so, you know, media organization right now, they usually don't have the money to pay for that. I don't know if that was satisfactory, but... Are we done?
Does anyone else have, did you want to answer the question, or? No?
I mean, it's the most difficult part. I work mainly in Italy, and in Italy I found it really, how can I say, more than terrible, the fact that the mainstream media don't invest in this kind of researches, and when you sell to them your project, they pay, I mean, I could say that they don't pay because the fee is so little that it would be impossible to cover even your job. So I don't know, maybe something has to happen for the Italian media, because in this way it's impossible to work, and they don't even recognize often the fact that you did a great job, and maybe you worked for 6 months to this kind. So I really hope that there will be some change with the new generations in Italian media. Abroad is much better, I would say.
Just before we finally wrap up, where can everyone find your projects? Is there a central website where they can?
They're all listed on the Journalism Center website, and then ours is on the Foundation's website, and is When Women Rule on trust.trust.com.
My website will be online in late September, the beginning of October, and it will be crossingtheriver.org. Yes.
Our website is online in 4 languages and is girlsgame.net. So.
Okay, briefly repeat, Coding Like a Girl was published on El Confidencial and Spiegel, and it will be published also on Al Jazeera English and online on Internazionale in Italy.
So mine is medicamentalia.org, not only the last one about contraception, but also the one about access to medicines and vaccines, in case you want to go back and read the rest of the projects.